aspect of the software development, how does it really kind of map to what we did, what Lean did originally with manufacturing or production environment. So inventory is a huge waste. I mean, I don't need to say about this because you've got Amazon. You understand how Amazon kind of companies work. Uber, Amazon doesn't have an inventory of its own. Amazon is the largest. I think it's the $2 trillion company in the world, the largest market by market value and market share, and even by the extent of customer base and things like that. It doesn't have an inventory of even a single product by itself. It has got zero inventory, meaning it doesn't own anything by itself, all the things that it sells. So that's a huge change of business model compared to what people were operating before. They thought that they need to own something, they need to put that product into their backyard or the inventory, then they need to actually give it to the distributors, and then the distributors would actually kind of sell it to the retailers, and that's how the final sale would happen to the end customer. No more there. So the Amazon and these kind of companies, businesses, they came up and they actually kind of destroyed that model. Fundamentally, they shook the foundations of how businesses were operating till then. So it's very lean now. The way, for example, even the same with Uber. Uber doesn't own any car that it actually has. The cars are owned by Uber drivers who would register with Uber. So Uber is a taxi company, but still it doesn't own a single taxi, so-called taxi or a car. Everybody's actually kind of owns the car themselves, and they would register with Uber. What a significant change of business model, right? So previously we used to think a taxi company means, okay, it should own the taxis. It should have a rank of taxis, a fleet of taxis. It changed fundamentally how we operate and what we think about the business. Same with all these other things like extra processing, for example, not required. It's all extra processing, too much of documentation in the paperwork within the software. Now we don't have all of those. In fact, if you kind of get through the interview, when you get your job, you're not even signing on the document anymore. You're actually kind of doing it through the DocuSign or electronic signatures and things like that. So even that is ruled out thanks to IT nowadays. The technology is used to eliminate even that kind of processing, which is not needed, extra documentation. And then overproduction. In those days, they say that I'm not sure if you've heard about it, but in companies like, for example, in countries like here or US or Western world or even in Eastern world, except a few other countries, if people want to strike against the management, if they want to show or protest against the management, the factory workers would actually kind of stop the work. They don't do the work. They actually shut the shop floor. They strike the work. That's how they would actually say that I'm actually not going to work. This is how I'm showing to the management that I'm not happy with your policies or with your salaries or whatever it is. But in Japan, apparently, they kind of overproduce. They actually go on the opposite. They do not strike. They do not reduce the workload. They do not stop their work, but they go on rampage. Instead of creating 100 products per day on the assembly line, they would create, let's say, 200 products. You know what happens by then? Because the fact is, it's overproduction. The 100 products is the kind of thing that is actually meeting the forecast, and it's actually going through the supply chain properly. And that's why its demand and supply is kind of matched. But now these people, the workforce, they were not happy. They wanted to show their anger, the protest. So they created another 100 more. Where would the management keep the 100 products? They don't have enough space in the inventory. They can't sell it to the customers. There's no demand. It goes waste. So that's a way of actually showing or creating waste by the workforce. I don't know how far that is true. I do not know it myself, but I just heard it. So perhaps just need to take it with a pinch of salt on that. But the concept is true in terms of creating something as an overproduction. Or you try and create something in excess, then it would be of waste because it's not consumed. It cannot be stored. And transportation was one of the major things there, because you had to actually transport the material, the finished product from the inventory, from the shop floor to the backyard, to the place where it is there, all the distribution centers or things like that. In the software development context, again, it's actually doing the wrong thing. You're trying to deliver the wrong thing. You're trying to actually deploy the wrong build. You're trying to actually create some instead of actually delivering the version 1.6.1, which is the latest, you try and deploy, for example, 1.5.3, which was developed about 5 months ago. and you're deploying it and you say, hey, you know what, there's a new release. And then people say, but what's changed? There's nothing that's changed. The same build, same features, same release. So so in a sense, what that means is that you need to have a good control on in terms of the configuration management, the versioning system, and how you're delivering and deploying and release management of your software. And then waiting is a big, as we discussed already, it's a huge contribution for waste. You should try and eliminate waiting for information, for the insights. Even, for example, not just waiting for the build from the testing team, but also, for example, you're waiting for review comments and the feedback from your customer representative. You delivered the build, you actually run them through, you deployed the build on the UAT server, the user acceptance test server, but you've been waiting for them to actually come back and say, yes, this is good, deploy it. So you deployed the build like 1 month ago, still you didn't have any comments, which means it's a waiting, you're just playing a waiting game, which is adding no value to whoever it is, even to the customer, not to the team, nor to the management. Very, a significant loss of productivity there. And then there it was called motion in the manufacturing setup. Motion means movement. So here you're actually trying to talk about in the software setup, it's about bad prioritization or thinking or picking up the item which is of the wrong value. Your Moscow prioritization gone completely wrong. You're working on something which is not supposed to be working on your task because it should be on the lower priority, and you assume something some way, and then you picked up that item and that's gone into the sprint backlog. You're working on it. Obviously, it's contributing to a lot of problems and a lot of waste. Defects, it's a no-brainer. Defect is a waste because not only takes time to fix it as we discussed, but also time to rework it, right? So you need to create a lot of time, lot of work to make sure that it is corrected. So that is the problem, not just to identify and keep it aside to reduce it, but the impact of that, but also to make sure it is corrected and reworked. That itself is a significant contributor